Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Extreme Radio, built by MDI Construction Inc., MDIConst.com, or MDI Construction Inc. on Facebook to see all of their latest projects and only the best contractor for your commercial building needs. Spencer Thompson, James Shannon, and Trent Legate again on this Sunday. Sad loss for the Titans, but an even better you see, James doesn't care, but the rest of us do, of course.
When you have games like Web FCA, who cares about the Tennessee Titans?
You see, you interrupted me. I was going to say, bad loss for the Titans, but good weekend for 8-man football entirely, with more games being shaped up for the playoffs. James, of course, said there and whatever, having a little bit of technical issues on his side, but we'll get those worked out as we go throughout the rest of the show. Let's get right into the scores from this weekend. The South Haven Christian School Patriots beat the Madisonville Defenders 44-22. The game up in Kentucky. So South Haven only loss on their season so far is to Christian Community, and they keep that. The good news is, at least with South Haven here, Trent, is that they, at the very least, will go into the bowl game. But they keep their playoff hopes alive, and they essentially control their own destiny, because if they win against Lighthouse this Friday, I'm sure James will either tell me I'm horribly wrong, or he'll be surprised at this. Hold on, James. Either I will be horribly wrong on this, or he will praise me for it. Is that if South Haven wins this game, because they have no more North games, if they win this game, then they are guaranteed a spot in the semis. That's at least mine. James nodded me on that. Well, they're already guaranteed a postseason spot here, James. It's that whether they lose or win, because Bowling Green, they're out. They can't make the bowl game even, especially with the scenarios and how many teams they've lost to. But what I'm saying is that I believe if they win against Lighthouse, they are guaranteed. They are almost guaranteed a semi, but that's still up in the air, of course.
Well, let's just say that South Haven is going to be the biggest fans of CCS next week that CCS could possibly have, because if Christian Community beats Lighthouse, Christian Community will be 3-0 in the North, and that's taking the Hendersonville game out. They'll be 3-0 in the North. South Haven will be 2-1, and Lighthouse will be 1-2. And, of course, that'll, kind of settle everything. But if Lighthouse beats Christian Community in 2 weeks, then you're going to have a 2-1 or a 1-2 tie across the board, or a 2-1 tie, I'm sorry. If South Haven beats the Lighthouse and Lighthouse beats CCS, you're going to have a 2-1 tie, and everyone will be tied with each other, and then it'll come down to a coin toss because you can't.
So just to clarify, Hendersonville's games are not counting for seeding, because technically Christian Community would be 3-1, and South Haven would technically, if it goes well, they would be 3-1 as well. So is Hendersonville not being counted in that?
Well, but here's the problem with that. I mean, you're holding Hendersonville canceling their game with Lighthouse against Lighthouse. Lighthouse didn't cancel that game. Hendersonville canceled that game because of field conditions. So you're holding against Lighthouse, A. B, Hendersonville already declared ineligible for the playoffs because of players from other teams. So, you're holding some major stuff against Lighthouse in two different aspects if you choose to do that, which I think that they shouldn't. Or, worst case scenario, somehow, they can't get a Lighthouse Hendersonville makeup game. That can't happen because of the way the scheduling is. So you can't hold that against them. If they could reschedule the game, I would say reschedule the game. But I have a feeling I think it would be a good ball game. I think Lighthouse might come out with the win. But it doesn't count as a forfeit either because of the situation. They didn't cancel.
Say forfeit.
Forfeit.
You said
forfeit.
For
Web.
Forfeit
Anyways.
for Web.
Anyway, speaking of forfeit. Anyways, but no, I wouldn't hold that against Lighthouse. So taking Hendersonville off, that's what the scenario is.
Now, Trent, victorious win there for South Haven against Madisonville. Not talking about playoffs and such. I mean, that was a home game, so we heard there were about 19 guys who came out for, 16 guys who came out for Madisonville in that game. So it's very it's good to see that they had players come out as compared to they had to cancel their game against Swanee, where they would have only had about 8-9 guys going down to the mountain, or going up to the mountain is a more term for that. So it's good to see that South Haven has a good victory going into their Lighthouse game, and Madisonville, still looking for their first franchise win.
I'm just curious, what was the final score for that game?
It was 44-22. South Haven beat Madisonville.
Okay, well, for Madisonville being they lost to Heat, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so for them losing to Heat, and then they're going up against, you could say, one of the best. Okay.
Trevor's having some technical issues.
I'm not. Okay, well, I don't know if y'all heard, but I'm just gonna start. I'm just gonna start where I finished. But I don't know about subs and all that. That could do a fact of how they scored points. But for Madisonville, I'm really happy to see that they had guys come out to the game. Noah's home, so it was probably easier for a lot of them. And isn't it like a homeschool affiliation?
It's like an 18U. It's like a 18U travel team almost, where kids just kind of sign up for the team, and if they don't want to show up, they don't have to. And then if the coaches turn around and punish them, then the kids just aren't going to show up. So you don't have them showing up anyway. So it's just a difficult situation for Coach Jones and Coach Grass out there.
Okay, so from what I heard from that, they would have to carpool to go to away games. Yeah. So I mean, that
Coach Jones has that they use, but
okay, but I'm just glad to see that Madisonville has guys that want to play, and whenever they're able to, which I don't really know the guys or circumstances, but when they're able to, they do want to play. But for South Haven, good for them. It's Madisonville, so kind of going, 0-18. What was the record before playing South Haven?
It was 0-6, I believe.
0-6.
Well, 0-7. 0-7 if you count the Swanee game as a forfeit, which technically Coach Jones called him the night before the game. So, Swanee is counting it as a forfeit, and it technically is because of the way everything was handled. But yeah, technically they're 0-7 right now.
Okay, well, for South Haven, I'm sure they. I'm not, no disrespect to Madisonville. I'm going to say one thing about their offensive. I think Madisonville probably has one of the best offensive lines in MTAC. But I do want to say I'm sure South Haven was able to get a lot of their young guys some playing time hearing that score. So, I mean, good job for South Haven. I'm really glad to see that there's guys coming out from Madisonville games. And me and James, both our predictions were correct.
Yeah, so you both predicted South Haven would win that game, and accurate this week. And hopefully South Haven will have some good momentum going into their next game, as Madisonville is on their bye week next week. So St. Andrews Swanee, we'll actually get to that game later because that was a more Saturday game. Christian Community was held to a score of 28-6 over Franklin Classical to win that game. James, you were at the first half of the Christian Community Classical game. You didn't see the second half and such, but this is the lowest score. CCS has been averaging about 50 points a game. And for them to be held to 28 points by Franklin Classical's defense, it really says something not only about Classical, but you did just remind me, we did get last week's statistic wrong with Webb beating Riverside that Franklin Classical would be knocked out of the playoffs. There is still a mathematical chance for Classical to make the playoffs. It's just they don't really control their own destiny. They do have to win their next game against Franklin Christian, but then I believe Swanee has to beat Webb, or it's essentially they have to win and then a few other teams have to lose. But we'll talk a little bit about, we'll have you talk a little bit, James, about the stats there. But more importantly, to only lose by 22 points to what looks like could arguably be the MTAC champions as of now with their completely undefeated
Alabama of MTAC.
The Alabama of MTAC, as Trent puts it, to only lose by 22 points to them, it says something.
Yeah, and I don't know if it was more so of for the game. I don't know if it was more CCS. I don't know if it was so much Classical holding CCS back. Classical had a couple touchdowns called back. I mean, the rest were pretty emphatic about the no celebration, no extracurricular activity. they did hold them to 28 points, but CCS right now, they look like the front of my car. I mean, they're just banged up, taped together. They've gone 8 straight weeks, 9 straight weeks, no bye week, and yeah, they haven't played the greatest teams maybe, but it's been a week after week after week thing, and so they have not have well actually 10 weeks if you count the jamboree. I mean, they've technically gone 10 weeks worth of ball games without a break. So this is a good bye week, a good time for them to kind of catch a breather and get ready for Lighthouse. Maybe go scout the Lighthouse South Haven game. But for Classical, I mean, this wasn't their best showing, but obviously I don't have a stutter. Obviously their defense was able to hold CCS. I mean, CCS had some big plays, some 60-yard run, a 90-yard run for a touchdown. So they were able to hold them to a certain extent. With their offense, and I haven't looked at the stats yet. But first half, I mean, into the first quarter it was only 6-0. Into the second quarter it was 22-6. So I think Classical, like you said, they sort of control their destiny, but they don't. If they beat FCA and Swanee beats Webb, then it'll be a third place tie for second place, a three-way tie for second place. If Webb does beat Swanee. No, if Webb beats Sewanee, it'll be a three-way tie for second place. If Sewanee beats Webb, it'll be a three-way tie for first place, and they will be out. So they're rooting for Webb to beat Sewanee, which could potentially happen.
Yeah, and obviously a lot of different things happened this weekend that are potentially shifting, and seeing as how FCS might be able to beat FCA in the final week of the season, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So the Tennessee Heat, victorious by 2 points. Well, actually, yeah, before we get into that, I believe, James had CCS pick for that game. Did you have Christian Community pick for that game, Trent? Trent, you had Trent had CCS picked, so both of them right on their predictions there for that week. So the Tennessee Heat beat Riverside 22-20. Riverside still not able to get that first victory, but only by 2 points. They had a close game against Lighthouse and only lost by 4. So now to go to 2, it would be the major, just frustration moment if Riverside were to lose their next game by 1 point to Hendersonville, their last game of the season. But just a good effort by both the Heat and Riverside. So the Heat at least will go out with 2 wins on their season, because as of now we don't. Well, actually, the Heat are facing Webb on this Friday, so they could have the potential to get their third victory on the season, as any team does. But Trent, for Riverside and the Heat to both put up that many points of 20 and everything, it's pretty significant at least.
Yeah, and one thing I gotta say, like y'all heard me say about 2 weeks ago about Riverside, don't let your heads down. You still got seniors you got to play for, and all of that good stuff. But with the Heat, by the way, just so you know, I picked the Heat to win. I don't know if I picked the Heat on broadcast, but I know on your poll that you put on Instagram at 8Man Extreme.
Our poll. Now that Instagram lets you do polls, that's something we can definitely use. But anyways.
Yeah, but on the poll, I picked Heat on that. So, yeah, I picked Heat to win that game. I'm sure that was a great game. I'm sure it was pretty much a battle, tooth and nail. And I think James is trying to jump out of his chair. I think he has something he wants to say.
Well, I got a chance to talk to Coach Creasy Friday night, just kind of find out how the game went. And apparently it was there was no score at halftime. And then all the points were scored second half. It came down to Riverside not getting a 2-point conversion on one of their touchdowns. That was the only difference in the ball game. So the Heat went 2 of 3 on 2-point conversions, and Riverside went 1 of 3. So that's how that happened. That's how it was 22-20. But all those points were scored second half. But just a close ball game. I know everyone overlooked this game because you had a 1-6 or 0-7 team going against each other, and everyone kind of looked at it as the stink bowl. But I mean, I knew that this was going to be a good ball game. Each team has 2 or 3 players on either side that have just completely laid it out on the line all year long, and that was evident of the ball game. I'm excited to watch it. I have some of the film, so I'm going to watch the ball game later. But I'm excited to watch some of these guys and some of these guys that we were able to invite to the All-Star game as well.
You had Riverside winning this game, didn't you? Yes. And Trent, did you have Riverside winning that game, or was it?
Did you not hear what I said?
That's right. He wins. So James has the upper hand in victories for that game, and hopefully both, or at least I think it is.
He picked the Heat, and the Heat won.
So Trent has the upper. Yeah, Trent has the upper hand in predictions as of now, as we can see here. So we'll see how the Heat performs in the rest of their season as they go to Webb this Friday, and we'll talk about that later. And potentially in the final week they have a game, but more developments on that will come later in the season. One of the biggest games that were anticipated this week for essentially first place in the South, at least as of now, the Webb School victorious over Franklin Christian Academy, 33-30. Now, James caught the last half of that game and saw all the intensity. It's sad to see that FCA is down to their third-string quarterback now, with Daniel Holcomb tearing his ACL, and I believe it was Caleb Schindel who broke his leg in the game. Yes, Caleb Schindel. Caleb Schindel broke his leg. It was on a tackle from behind by one of the Webb players. And from what James told me, it came down to a fumble on one of the last drives, I believe by Ben Duncan, or not Ben Duncan, is that John Buchanan with the fumble on the last drive. So it's always sad to see how it comes down to that kind of stuff. But what you have to realize with this game is that both of them knew what was on the line, and obviously with it being 33-30, this could very well be a preview of the championship. Not necessarily, but it could very well be, because both of these teams, and the other thing with this game as well was that they were co-champions last season, so that's why we picked this game for them to face off against each other. But it was a really good matchup in Jim Warren Park.
Spencer, how are you going to say this could be a preview of the championship with a 9-0 Christian community
That's
team?
why I said potentially. Because you never know, upsets can happen. Like, for example, Webb made an upset against Lighthouse, who was favored to go to the championship last year in the semis. So all upsets are possible.
Yeah, it is, but at the same time, I don't see that happening.
And
right now,
I mean, the Predators were 16th on the brackets, and look how far they made it. I'm just saying it can happen.
They're also 0-2. They got spanked by the Penguins last night, and they couldn't do it against the Bruins. So don't even.
Wow, I don't even think he's a real Predators fan.
Yeah, he's not.
I am a
fake
fan. Anyways, I was able to catch the of course, the Patriots.
I was just saying.
I was able to catch the second 6-1 overall, but you got what really matters is divisional standing. Divisional record overall. Anyways, no, I was able to catch the second half of this game. Apparently, FCA went up, I believe it was like 22-0, and Webb came back and tied it. And so they swapped scores back and forth. And Webb scored with about, it was like 4.5 minutes left. And they scored with about 4.5 minutes left, and they took a 32-30 lead. Well, they had a decision, because you've got Ben Duncan, who's kicked some extra points and kicked some field goals, and the potential for him to kick a field goal could have been there. I mean, he could have done it for maybe 20 yards. If FCA got inside the 15 and stalled, they could have tried it with him and at least given it a shot. So if Webb went for the 2-point conversion and missed it, they're only up by 2. You let Duncan kick a field goal. So you had to think about all possible scenarios. So they brought their extra point kicker out there. He kicked the extra point, and they went up by 3. Which made it, to where at least if that happened, they would at least be tied. And if they scored, they would only be down by 3 if they didn't get the 2-point. If Webb was able to march down, they could get a field goal and tie it. So with all the scenarios, it just made sense to kick the extra point and to just get for sure 1 point. And then the Falcons started driving down with about a minute and a half left. John Buchanan fumbled about the 10-yard line and turned the ball back over, and then Webb was just able to run the clock out for the rest of the game. But it was a really great ball game, a great second half. I was glad I was there. I'm excited to go back and watch the first half and just watch the game in its entirety. But, yeah, just a great ball game between two really great teams, just back and forth. And like you said, the injury for younger Schindel. So our thoughts and prayers to him, as with every quarterback that's gone down. I mean, that's really the fourth quarterback that's gone down this year. So our thoughts and prayers with him, and we wish him a speedy recovery, as with all of them. But yeah, I mean, it was a great ball game.
Yeah, so you had FCA winning this game, even though you said it was a toss-up on Sunday. And Trent, did you pick
Webb? I picked FC. Did I? I'm just gonna say I picked FCA because I'm not 100% sure, and I don't want to go back on my word. I'm just gonna say I picked FCA.
Yeah. So if we're correct, then both of you guys unfortunately wrong in your prediction on that. But you did both say on Sunday it was a toss-up game, very much so.
Cue Willy Wonka. You are wrong. You lose. Good day, sir.
That's not the quote, but okay. It's you get nothing, you lose. Good day, sir. You said it wrong.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Willy Wonka aficionado over here.
Yeah, of course. So the last game that was a Saturday game, of course, afternoon Saturday game, St. Andrew Swanee beat Hendersonville 56-8. Now, we said it before, Hendersonville not qualified for the playoffs, and also because of it being an interdivision game, it didn't really matter for standing-wise. But good motivation. Do you mind? Good motivational factor for Swanee to get another victory as they go on their bye week and then have their final matchup during rivalry night or rivalry week.
Rivalry week.
Exactly, yes.
Rivalry.
Yeah, so they'll face Webb in the final week of the season on the 20th, but they have a bye week going into this Friday. But for them to go or for Swanee to host Hendersonville and to put up that many points, I mean, it kind of says something because we haven't seen Hendersonville since the second week of the season when they faced Madisonville. We've only covered 2 games for them so far and haven't seen them in any other games. But it's good to see at least that, Swanee is still keeping some motivation here, and it's just a good ball game all around, James.
Yeah, it's a tough situation for Hendersonville because, I mean, they're going to make the 2-hour trip down to Swanee in the middle on a Saturday afternoon, with knowing that, more than likely they were going to lose. I mean, those 12, 13, 14 kids, they play their hearts out. They fight their butts off, and man, they are the toughest group of kids that I've ever seen. I mean, just constantly fighting, and they don't have any quit in them. And Coach Meek is the same way. That whole coaching staff, they train them not to be that way. That's the same way the coaching staff is, but just a tough situation. And for Swanee, it was good to see them get back up in the saddle, and after having the week off, and then they had played all their it was like five games in a row, and then to get the game cancellation from Madisonville, that kind of threw their rhythm and their got them out of the swing of things. I know I talked to Coach Hargis, and he said, practice was kind of sluggish sometimes this week because the guys didn't have a game, and so they didn't have that routine still going. But good to see them pick up a win, get back in the winning column, and or stay in the winning column, and they still have they're going to be in the postseason. It's just a matter of which side of the postseason, but more than likely they're going to be in the postseason. But it's going to come down to.
Yeah, I kind of hate that. I can't really say anything about these games or nothing because I'm a type of person where I like to see it before I speak upon it. So that's the reason why I haven't been commenting on a couple of these games. But I would love to see the stat sheet for this game. I just want to see how well Bader did. I'm a big Bader fan, and what you got something to say, James? You got something to say? But for Swanee, good for them. I wonder how much they threw the ball. Yeah. I don't really. I would love to say something about this game, but I don't got anything for it.
Yeah, and of course, Swanee has one more game on their season during rivalry week, as they call it, and that game is going to be very shaping of the playoffs as well. So we don't have an interview today. Kentucky RV Sales interview is not occurring today, unfortunately, because we don't have any coaches to do an interview with as of now. So we're just going to talk a little bit about playoff scenarios. We're going to go through. Each of the teams top to bottom on the helmet schedule and talk about what the scenario is for them to get into the playoffs or the bowl game, or if they're eligible or not. We'll start with Bowling Green Christian Academy. They're unfortunately out even a chance at the bowl game, unfortunately, because of their loss to Lighthouse as we broadcast that game. That was kind of the final. That was kind of the final say on if they would have a chance at the even the bowl game or not. And unfortunately, they have been knocked out. So now we'll head to South Haven. They have their game against Lighthouse this Friday. So they're right now the only loss they have is to Christian Community, and they're 1-1 technically in the North if you're counting Hendersonville games. But if you're not, if you're counting Hendersonville, actually, you're right. They are 2-1 because they faced Bowling Green back in the second week of the season. If you're not counting Hendersonville, they're 1-1. So James, you're kind of more. You're not on the encyclopedia side of 8-Man football. That's more to Jonathan Thompson at Tennessee 8-Man Weekly. But you are sort of the statistician, I guess would be the word for it, and kind of bylaws expert. What will it take for South Haven to get first place in the North, or what will it take for them to make it to the semis?
Well, what will it take for them to get first place? It will come down to heads or tails. It's going to come down to a coin toss. If you can stay with me and follow with me. So you got South Haven Lighthouse coming up this week. If South Haven beats Lighthouse, then taking out Hendersonville games, South Haven will be 2-1, and South Haven will be 2-1. Christian Community is 2-0, and Lighthouse is 1. Next week, South Haven is off, but Lighthouse plays CCS. If Lighthouse beats CCS, then there will be a 1-2 three-way tie in the North for first place, second place in the bowl game. So it'll come down to a coin toss for who's going to host, who's going to travel, who will play in the bowl.
So if Christian Community wins out all of their games, if they beat Lighthouse, then they're guaranteed first place in the North.
Yes, because they will be.
Well, duh, yeah. If you go undefeated, yeah.
I'm making sure to clarify for some of the people who may have that question there.
Yeah, and that was if Lighthouse beats CCS, if CCS beats Lighthouse next week, they win out. They'll host, and we still don't know who they're going to host because the South is going to come down to a coin toss for first or second.
So if Christian Community wins, if Christian Community wins against Lighthouse on Friday, is it going to vary, or not this Friday, next Friday? If Christian Community beats Lighthouse, is it going to vary? It's going to whoever wins the game on Friday between South Haven and Lighthouse, that determines who gets second place and who gets to the bowl.
Yep, it'll determine who goes on the road and who plays in the bowl game.
Yeah. So
I do have a question. What do you mean by coin toss? Like, is that like a legit coin toss?
It's a legit coin toss. It's from my understanding, and I'm going to pull up the MTAC website.
Yeah, according to, I actually had a conversation this past week with MTAC president Tim Pettit, and was talking to him about all the tiebreaker scenarios and about all that stuff. And I also talked with Jenna Jones, the league's administrator, when we went down to the Webb FCS game, and it comes down to division record for your team, as well as if your division record is tied, then it comes down to a coin toss. Literally, heads or tails for if you get first, second place, or bowl game. Because the argument of it is some teams have more difficult schedules than the others, as well as there's different scenarios that happen with that. So it just goes by. You have to play each team in your division once. And again, we go based off of, we're hoping that the league will not penalize Lighthouse for Hendersonville canceling their game against them, especially because Hendersonville is playoff ineligible. We don't know if the league is going to count Hendersonville's games against South Haven and Christian Community. We just don't know until the final week if that's going to be necessary, because it's just we don't know. And with that, we're basing all of these clinching scenarios off of just South Haven, Christian Community, Bowling Green, and Lighthouse. That's what we're basing them off for now. But yes, it does come down to a coin toss, quite literally.
Here's something interesting too. If they did it based off of record versus the South opponents, Christian Community is 4-0, Lighthouse is 1, South Haven is 1. So you can't really use that as a basis. Whereas for teams in the South, if you want to use that, it's a little bit closer in terms of games played and record.
Yeah, because South Haven has their only game in the South was against Riverside, and Christian Community scheduled games against the Heat, Franklin Christian, Riverside, and FCS. So that's the other question that goes forward, is if the league should potentially make it so that you play all of the teams in your division and you play a certain number of games against teams in the South, which I think we've talked about it a little bit on the show or either off camera here, James, of that may be a step that the league should take in the future, but it also brings up the question of, oh, well, your schedule is more different than our team. We should get the playoffs, or we should do this and this. So it gets very ambiguous with that kind of scenario.
Well, and if you say, okay, let's take for instance St. Andrew Swan. They're going to play 8 games this year, and the same for Webb. They're both going to play 8 games this year, which is the maximum they can't play until the last week of August, and with including a bye week for fall break or wherever, 8 games is the max. So, there's 7 teams in the South, or 6 teams in the South, rather, 5 in the. So they're going to have 5 games that they already have to play for their division. Then the league can say, okay, you have to play 3 teams from which there's 5. So you have some options there. You have some variation. So you can say, okay, for let's say you're Swanee, we're going to play Hendersonville Christian, we're going to play Bowling Green, which they've played both, and they can say, okay, we're going to play Lighthouse. Okay, well, there's your 3 games. They would have. Who knows if they would have beaten Lighthouse or not? But they're 2-0 against Bowling Green and Hendersonville. So, in terms of that, whereas you've got somebody like Webb who could go schedule CCS, whereas we don't know who could have won. They could have scheduled. They already had Hendersonville on the schedule, and then they could have gotten Bowling Green or South Haven or something. So, it's. I've talked to several people, and several people are in favor of doing that. But it means the league has to be more involved with the scheduling and enforcing, hey, that you have to play a certain number of teams from this division as well as your own. Because the only rule right now is you just have to play the team.
Yeah, and the other thing that comes with that as well that schools could argue is that, well, if we have to play these amount of teams, then we can't play any out-of-conference teams, or may not have enough time or enough breaks on our schedule to play out-of-conference teams, and that would bring an issue for, say, the Freedom Cowboys, who play a lot of MTAC teams out of Alabama. That bringing an issue for them as well to try and get scheduling in. So that's kind of the issue that does come up with it as well.
But if you're the league, you really don't care about whether or not Freedom can schedule games. Right. That's not your problem. Your problem is making sure that there is a fair and set tie-breaking scenario and a way of doing things. Because let's say they say, okay, you have to play 3 teams from, okay? So they play the 3 teams from the North, and you have 3 teams that end up having the same record against those teams. At that point, I would be okay with a coin toss because you've exhausted all of your situations and all of your possibilities. Technically, they could say, okay, well, in your division games and your games against the North Division, for instance, okay, so let's take points scored. Let's do it that way. You have to exhaust every possible scenario of breaking down a tiebreaker before you get to a toss, because that's so disrespectful to me. You've got kids that have busted their butt all week, and yes, they didn't win the games they needed to. They didn't make it. They put themselves in that situation. But then to have it come down to a coin toss, that makes your league look almost like a joke, because you're going to come down to a coin toss to determine postseason.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I talked about with Jenna Jones as well. I asked, have you ever thought about doing it by, overall season record or by passing yards, defensive yards, and such? And she gave this. Yeah, well, I'm basing this off of the NFL. This is what they do of overall record, then division record, then away games won, then home games won, then passing yards, then defense. I think it's like passing yards, then rushing yards, and points scored. And if all of those are the exact same in a team, then it comes down to a coin toss, because you've literally exhausted everything, which it's impossible for them to come down to a coin toss, almost nearly impossible. But I did talk to Jenna Jones about that. I've said, have you considered passing yards or overall season record and such? And she said the issue with that is schools could argue that their schedule was more difficult than another school if they're in that tie-breaking scenario, which, that's the iffy thing about it as well. Because say, for example, you have Riverside, who say they won, or say they went, sort of winless, but they won all their games in the South, and FCA won all their games in the South, but they played some teams in the North. Let's say their record were the same or something. then Riverside could potentially argue, well, we've played Christian Community and Webb hasn't. We've played an undefeated team and lost to them, so we should be in the thing because our schedule is more difficult. That's just an example scenario of schools could argue, hey, our schedule is more difficult than yours, so why should we be penalized for that or something? So it's part of it that I agree with on how kind of uneven the scheduling scenario is for MTAC at the moment, but I think you're right that it may be the best step for the league in the direction to have every team in your division, you play them once, and then you have to play 2 to 3 teams in the North on your schedule.
And this is all just for South Haven?
No, this is because we could potentially have a 3-way tie for first place, second place, and bowl game in the North. And you're going to have a tie in the South for first place or second place. It's going to be either way. If FCA beats Classical, then that's a whole nother. But if Classical beats FCA, okay, then if Webb beats Sewanee or Sewanee beats Webb, either way you're going to have a 3-way tie. So Classical needs to win that ball game to give themselves a coins opportunity. Let me say something else about the whole. Well, my schedule is harder than your schedule. Again, I go back to the whole thing about freedom can't schedule. We're not in this for. Well, we got to make sure that everyone's schedule is the same. It's down to you. You have to know which games to schedule. And if let's say this year, if that had been the case, okay, so you had pull it up real quick, just so that I have everything exactly right. Okay, so you've got, let's say, St. Andrew Sewanee. They went and scheduled Bowling Green and Hendersonville. Okay, you got to look at how those two teams' history. You got to kind of think, okay, how do I think those teams will do this year? If you don't think they're going to do that well, go ahead and schedule them, because then you're going to be 2-0. But then if you've got somebody like, let's say, Franklin Classical, for instance, they went and got Hendersonville Christian and Christian Community. Okay, well, yeah, they went 1. But they can't argue, well, we had to play CCS and you played Bowling Green. It doesn't matter. You scheduled you made your own schedule. Don't blame the conference. Don't blame everybody else. Don't point fingers and try to get out of it. You set your own schedule up. So this isn't about, I don't want to say this isn't about being fair, because everyone wants to be fair. But at the same time, this isn't about, hey, my schedule's harder than your schedule and talking smack about each other. Get over it. Be a bunch of adults. If you didn't schedule your team to where they could win games, get over it.
Yeah, quite literally mic drop by James Shannon there. So Trent's right. It was all about South Haven. So we know in the North, if Christian Community wins, they're first place, and then whoever wins that game between Lighthouse and South Haven gets second place in the bowl. Trent, you got one more thing?
Yeah, well, I just gotta say, it's all up to you. So don't even make it where, like, I was told never leave a game up to a ref. Well, never leave like that stuff up to, yourself. It doesn't really matter which team is better. Like records. Whenever you step on that field, it's just 8 versus 8. You just gotta be better. Your 8 have to be better than their 8. Doesn't matter what the record is once you step on that field. It's just who comes and shows and who's ready to play. So all that crap about like the better team and all that, I don't agree with that, because it's whoever shows up and is ready to play.
Yeah, and of course, that's from a player's perspective as well, is that you just have to be better than them. That's what it comes down to, and then it's a very interesting topic, but hopefully the league will make the best decision going forward so that it's a more fair, at least it's a more non-confusion scenario that, like, for example, the NFL, of how they know, okay, these people are going to make the playoffs this far out, and they already clinch a playoff berth and everything like that. So we're hoping that they'll be able to resolve that as we go forward. So now we look at the South. Riverside, the two teams we know are out. There is no mathematical chance whatsoever that they can make the playoffs, are the Riverside Knights and the Tennessee Heat. Unfortunately, they both have a losing record. They've lost to our many teams in the South. Riverside has lost all of their games in the South, so they have no chance there. And the Heat, declare themselves out of playoff contention, but they only have their game against Webb on Friday. But even if they won that game, they would not be eligible to get to the playoffs. So the Webb School, with their victory against FCA, James, what would it take for them to get first place in the South to host a semi?
All right, so again, you have to stay with me. Here we go. Buckle up. So, standings. Okay, so you got Webb right now. Let's say you take we'll leave the Tennessee Heat because it's going to take a miracle for Webb. So you got Webb at 3-0, Franklin Christian at 3-1, St. Andrew Sewanee at 3-1, Franklin Classical at 2-2. The Webb School plays this week. The other teams have off. Then you get to rivalry night. Rivalry week. You're going to have FCA, obviously, Battle of Franklin, FCA, FCS, Battle of the Boards, Sewanee, and Webb. If Franklin Classical, the only way this tie happens, Franklin Classical beats Franklin Christian, okay? Then Franklin Classical will be 3-2. Franklin Christian will be 3-2 as well. Classical will hold the tiebreaker over the two. Then, if Sewanee beats the Webb School, Webb will be 4-1, and they'll still have first place. But Sewanee will be Sewanee will be 4-1 at that point. So you're going to have, in that case, you would have a tie for first place between Webb and Sewanee, and Sewanee would have the record for that. They would hold the tiebreaker for that. And for Franklin Christian and Franklin Classical would hold the tiebreaker. So Classical would go to the bowl game, and then it would be between Webb and Sewanee first, which in that case, Sewanee would get first place, Webb would get second, Classical would have bowl game. So that can happen. If Franklin Christian beats Franklin Classical, then they'll be 4-1, and Classical will be 2-3. They'll be out. Now, Webb School and Sewanee, if that situation happens, Christian beats Classical. If the Webb School beats Sewanee, they will be 5-0 in the South. Will have first place, and then Sewanee will be 3-2. Franklin Christian will be 4-1. So it'll be set, be taken care of. But if Sewanee can beat the Webb School, then you're going to have St. Andrew Sewanee at 4-1. The Webb School would be at 4 with a win over the Heat this week, and Franklin Christian would be 4-1 with a win over Classical. So then you're going to have a 3-way tie for first place, and it would come down to a coin toss because Webb beat FCA, FCA beat Sewanee, and Sewanee would have beat Webb. So you're going to have a 3-way tie.
So how would you do a coin toss between three teams?
Well, it's
simple. 3 coin tosses.
You say, okay, Webb, FCA, coin toss. Okay, Webb won. FCA, Sewanee, coin toss. FCA won. Webb, Sewanee, coin toss. Webb won. Okay, you won 2 of the coin tosses. You won 1. Team wins 0. Because that's going to happen. Somebody's going to win 2. Somebody's going to win 1. Somebody's going to win none. So at that point, that would decide. You get first seed. You get second seed. You get bowl game. So that's how you do a coin toss between.
So
why don't they just pick the shortest straw?
I grew up with 2 brothers. I know how to do coin tosses between 3 parties.
You hear what Trent said?
Just do a straw poll.
Get the athletic directors.
Hey, listen, you could do that. You could do Chinese checkers. You could do. You could get creative.
Let's get the athletic director for FCA.
Hold on. Get game of Uno.
Get Scott Dorsett, Tim Pettit, and who's Sewanee's athletic director?
Zeitler's his last name.
Okay, so let's get Zeitler, Pettit, and Dorsett.
I would honestly,
the quarterback.
Hey, I would rather get Feld, Brugge, Adams, and Hargis playing.
Oh yeah, let's get them all to play Uno.
To see that,
we could broadcast it.
All right,
and commentate on it. Okay, and we're gonna look at this.
Ooh, that's a bad move.
That's a pretty. I don't know about that. You don't want to lay that. Oh, he sets him back. That could get interesting. But no. So that's how the scenario breaks down. So if Classical beats Franklin Christian, and the Sewanee beats Webb, you're gonna have a 2-way tie for first place. And a 2-way tie for second place, or for the bowl game rather. And technically it would be a tie, but then when you count head to head, Sewanee would take first place, which would be interesting because they could potentially host South Haven, and those teams have never played. Then you would have Webb traveling to Christian Community, and then you would have if you had the second place team, let's say South Haven, then you have Lighthouse as the third place. So then you would have Lighthouse and Franklin Christian playing in the bowl game, which they already played this year. So it can go or actually it'd be Lighthouse and Franklin Classical. It could go several ways. It's interesting, and it's gonna get really fun in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's amazing how this is the only conference that I am aware of that the second solution to placing teams in the playoffs is a coin toss.
Well, it's technically the third because you've got divisional standing, and then you've got head to head. Which if we get the three-way tie, then you've got one team who beat the other, and then the other team. So you're going to have a tie with that. So technically, it's the third way to solve it. But still, that's not enough. You can't just get to the third option of breaking a tie. Coin toss. You have to exhaust more resources.
This conference is because they have the consolation game and the bowl game. They focus so much on players. Why not make it by number of seniors on the team? I'm just saying. Whoever has the most seniors on the team, they go to a first place slot because it's their last game. They got to focus on whoever has the most seniors. They've worked the hardest. That's a more satirical. That's a satirical proposal. To clarify, that's just a satirical proposal.
What does that mean?
It's a solution that is completely ridiculous. And
so satirical, but you can't do math.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I'm trying to hear him explain it.
Satirical means it's a solution that is not actually something I would want to be implemented, but it's to bring my point to the light. So my point is that they need a better tie-breaking scenario. So why don't we do something completely ridiculous with this, and maybe it'll work.
We're already doing the coin toss. We're doing something ridiculous. Why not pick
that's why I'm proposing
ridiculous?
Another ridiculous one to bring my point to the light of they need – yeah. So a lot of crazy scenarios. We won't know until the last whistle is blown on the last game on October 20th as to who's – well, we may not even know then, but we won't know until potentially after that weekend. And we are going to do our best. If it comes down to a coin toss, we will broadcast it. Or whatever the league decides, we will be on that conference call or wherever they decide. If they hold an emergency meeting at the web school, wherever they host it, we will be there so that everybody can know, of course, and we'll give our analysis on the game and such. But we will be there when that happens.
Trent brings up a good point. Why worry about covering the coin toss? And that's because so that people can have an eye on what's actually happening and have video proof of what's happening, because I guarantee that it.
Exactly.
It's just flipping a coin.
Exactly. And hey,
who's to say there won't be two-headed coin?
Oh, and hey, good news about this, James. If we say, hey, we're broadcasting this, they won't kick us out.
It's possible.
They won't kick us out.
Video evidence. Taking Bowling Green. Well, I think both teams are going to let their seniors play. I know you got like Spencer, Duncan, and DJ on Bowling Green. Is Bader and Sturgis seniors on Hendersonville?
Yes.
Yeah, so you got them. That's their last. Is that the last game, or is that the? No. We're talking about week 10. Right?
We're talking about this Friday.
Okay. So, and I guess in a coach's mindset, they kind of want to build up their team for next season, kind of see what they got a little bit. Kind of giving the juniors a little bit more of a leadership role this week, because neither one of them are bowl eligible at the least, are they?
No.
No, because of Bowling Green losing to Lighthouse, they are not even eligible for the bowl, and Hendersonville at the beginning of the season declared themselves ineligible for the playoffs.
Well, I mean, the seniors, they know and not if they're on the All-Star game, so they got that game to look forward to. But for seniors, this is your last 2 games to play with your brothers. You want to make this memorable. You want to win out with your brothers. You always want to win out, especially with the seniors. It's going to be huge for them because this is your last time. This is your last rodeo. If you don't go to college, this is it. Yeah. Very last games you play, besides the All-Star game, of course. But this is the last game you're going to play with your team, considering you don't get kicked out like me. But, yeah, I'm going to take Bowling Green on this. But Hendersonville, I think it's going to be a good fight because I enjoy Hendersonville's game. I really like their coach. He actually this is kind of funny. Both of my All-Star coaches are facing each other with Brown and Meek. So I think it's going to be a great game to watch. And I know we're not broadcasting it, but I would love to be there. If I can be in 2 places, I would be there.
Yeah, James may go up to that Bowling Green Hendersonville game. Not sure because he's only got 2 other games to choose from. And why is James put us on Instagram Live? Right?
Just ignore him.
Yeah, Instagram Live. That's what's up.
Yeah, just put us on there anyways. Okay, so you've got Bowling Green to win, obviously. But, James, who's your pick for Bowling Green Hendersonville? Come on, James.
Hendersonville Bowling Green. I have – oh,
yeah, check your stuff.
I got to check.
Check yourself or you wreck yourself.
It sounds about right.
I have –
drum roll, please.
Keep it going.
Keep the drum roll going, Trent.
Keep it going. I have Hendersonville pick for this ball game.
You have Hendersonville. Do you stick with that pick, or are you changing it?
Yes, I'm sticking with that pick.
Care to elaborate, Mr. Instagram Live?
Yes, there is no sound. You can read my lips. There's no sound. Care to elaborate? I picked a preseason.
Wow. Usually you're more colorful. Usually you're more colorful with your commentary.
I mean, hold on.
Thank you. Come on.
Let me pull this up.
He's distracted.
Yeah, this is what happens when James does social media.
Here we go. Bowling Green is 2-4. Hendersonville's 2-5. Right? They're both 0-2 in their division. If you want to break it down, because they've both played the same teams, Bowling Green is they've scored 40 points and allowed 124. Hendersonville has scored 14 and allowed 98. So I'm going to give Bowling Green technically has the edge, but I have picked Henderson in this game preseason. I'm going to stick with my preseason pick.
Even though you change your preseason picks like once every week.
Don't start.
Okay.
Anyways.
So the other game we have from the South. So Christian Community's on their only bye of the season, which they played, as James said, 9 straight games. So they're on a bye. Riverside's on their bye. Franklin Christian is on their bye. Franklin Classical is on their bye. St. Andrew Swanee is on their bye. And the Madisonville Defenders are on their bye. So from the South, we have the Heat traveling to the Webb School for the game of the South there, which it's hard to say you expect anything from this game. Now, the Heat did get their victory against Riverside Christian, a close victory, so they have 2 wins on the season and have that momentum going forward. But it's really hard to see or hard to say that Webb will have any challenge with the Heat just because of how dominant they've been, especially with that victory of 3 points against FCA, a must-needed win for their chances of having first place in the South. But the Heat are always full of surprises. We've seen that in games they've played and how close of games they've had here, Trent. So what are your thoughts on Webb Heat?
I'm going to go out on a limb here, but I'm going to say Webb is – I'm going to go ahead and say Webb is going to – I'm going to pick Webb to win. But I think it's going to be close in the first half, but then Webb's going to start taking the game away during the second half. Because from the one Webb game we watched, they looked like they're pretty much a 4-quarter team. And and remember when we broadcasted – no, we broadcast that they were leading in the first half, but then they started falling behind in the second half. And Bowling Green be able to come up from behind and be able to.
Sorry about that.
Do you mind,
James?
And Bowling Green was able to come up with the win. So I'm gonna pick Webb, but I feel like it's gonna be kind of toe to toe during the first half. But then I think Webb's gonna take it away in the second.
So Trent, you've got Webb. James, what do you got preseason? Or right now, whichever prediction. We don't know with you anymore, honestly. We have no idea.
I'll show you. I have web picks for this ball.
Are you going to elaborate on any of your picks? You're usually more talkative in previous things. Stop. Get off Snapchat.
I'm on Instagram.
Get off Instagram.
No, I think with this ball game, I mean the Webb School, a gutsy win against the Heat, and just a great job that they've done so far. They had tough losses against.
You just said Webb, a gutsy win against the Heat.
Against Franklin Christian.
There you go.
He's already calling it.
Anyways, but no, they had a tough loss against New Life from Alabama, and that's their only loss on the year. And they've dominated the teams they've won. Other than Classical was a back and forth game, but that defense did its job and did what it needed to do. And so, I've got them picking up the win. The Heat, I love the Heat. They're fighters. They're not going to quit, and I think it's going to be. I think you're going to have the same result that you had for the Riverside game with Webb, where the Heat are able to put some points on the board, and they have a good ball game, but I think the Webb School is still going to. There you go, Scott Dorsett.
Yeah, just more reason for him to let us broadcast that coin toss if it does happen. And the extreme game of the week. We're live throughout the rest of the season through the All-Star game. The extreme game of the week. Lighthouse Christian School travels to South Haven Christian School. The Lions face the Patriots. This game, as we said earlier, Trent, you've been wanting to see the Patriots all season. James and I saw them in the first week when they hosted Madisonville and broke their winless streak from 2016, where they had lost in the national championship in 2015 and then went on to lose every game in 2016 as they merged with the Middle Tennessee Athletic Conference. So we saw that first game, and that started an incredible undefeated streak. So now they're 6-1 to my knowledge, and South Haven, they're 6-1 right now. If they win this game, they're at least. I believe they are at least guaranteed a spot in the semi.
We went over this for like 30 minutes.
Yeah, so we did, but this is going to be a very good game, not just for you to see South Haven, but to help shape the seeds in the MTAC North Division.
Well, I want to see South Haven play. I've been wanting to see South Haven play since I heard that they were pretty much going on, like
we could have gone and watched them in Madisonville Friday night.
Yeah, but I'm a college student and have friends, and we like to do fun things.
We have friends.
Yeah, unlike you. Oh,
I got two amazing kids.
What, me and Spencer?
I
feel like you're my kid sometimes.
But on to my pick. I told y'all I was gonna pick Lighthouse, but I'm gonna change it. I'm gonna take South Haven. Which, if anyone knows me close, they think this is ridiculous. I'm actually picking South Haven at all.
Where is Trent? What did you do with him? And who are you?
I'm a new man. Yeah, coming from a Pleasant View guy, I'm gonna pick South Haven. But I think it's gonna be a good game. From what I've heard, they only have one injured, and that was their second string quarterback.
Second string freshman Andrew Crawley.
Yeah, and so that being their only injury, and seeing how last year the reason why they went winless last year, it was because of injuries. So now they're healthy, and now they're facing Lighthouse, and Lighthouse hasn't really had time to. Well, they have had time, but they haven't had as much time as South Haven to merge as a team, with your new leaders and such, to merge and have enough games like that to be kind of on the communication level and just knowing each other kind of level with your new leaders. So I'm going to take South Haven, but I feel like it's going to be a close game. I feel like it's going to be a good game. And I feel like I'm gonna enjoy this game. I'm gonna sit back and actually enjoy broadcasting this game because I'm gonna get to see South Haven play.
So you're telling me that you haven't enjoyed broadcasting any other games? You haven't sit back and enjoyed it? Is that what you're telling me?
Well, I mean, that one when Bowling Green beat Heat was pretty good.
Of course, he's Bowling Green bias.
Oh my gosh!
Okay, James.
Give me the nice press box on Friday night, though.
James, we know you.
I know I beat South Haven there last year.
Oh.
No! Oh no!
Oh, okay.
And you took your senior pictures on their home field. But anyway.
Okay, James, we know fully well you have been berated and fully just kind of slaughtered by the South Haven fan base for predicting them at 2-6. You've been slaughtered by that South Haven fan base. I know you may want to change your preseason prediction. This is the only time I will say you are justified for changing your preseason prediction. But what have you got? What are you finalizing your pick with?
I had South Haven picked preseason, and I will stick with my prediction.
So this was one of the 2 wins you thought South Haven would have?
I did. I thought they would win when Madisonville came to them, and I got that right. And I thought that they would win to this Friday when they host Lighthouse, partly because I didn't know what Lighthouse had. So that's part of the reason for the pick. But yeah, I've got South Haven.
But
it's going to be a great game.
If you had a do-over, would you take Lighthouse?
No, I wouldn't because I'm not completely 100% sold on the Lighthouse passing attack and that deep. It's good. Don't get me wrong, it's good. But at the same time, South Haven's secondary is about to get tested in a major, major way. And I think it'd be different if they had little Crawley back there. But just having the other freshman cornerback and then having Xavier Vincent and a couple other guys back there, they are about to get tested in a way that they've never been tested this season. And it's going to be an interesting matchup.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to this game. And again, it essentially shapes kind of it potentially determines who's going to the bowl game and who's going to be second place traveling to a South team for the playoffs. But it is going to be a very good game to broadcast live from Springfield this Friday. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that'll wrap it up for Extreme Radio this Sunday, built by MDI Construction Inc. As always, go to MDIConst.com or search up MDI Construction Inc. on Facebook to learn how you could get the best deal for all of your commercial property needs. And they actually
dang straight you can.
Oh yeah, and they actually they are now with Paul Kuharsky for the Titans. Or Chuharski, however you pronounce it. Yeah, so they've
yes, they are the sponsor for Paul Kuharsky. Travel around and cover all of the Titans away games. So good stuff from them.
Yeah, so they're I saw that because that post was today of the Titans being in Miami. So he said thanks to MDI Construction Inc. I saw you retweet that
with a huge shout out. Yeah, we retweeted that because obviously when one of our sponsors goes big time like that, it's pretty.
Yeah,
anyway.
Yeah, it is. You could be the sponsor that goes big time. Just email 8manextreme@gmail.com.
You could be next.
Yeah, you could be next. Lesson learned. If you sponsor 8Man Extreme, you go big. All right. Well, for James Shannon and Trent Legate.
James Shannon does not approve of this message.
Yeah, not necessarily. All right. For James Shannon and Trent Legate, I'm Spencer Thompson. We'll see you for the Extreme Game of the Week. Lighthouse Christian School Lions at the South Haven Christian School Patriots.
Bye-bye.
Coverage will start at 6:45 p.m. Central Standard Time on Friday. So again, for Shannon and Legate, I'm Spencer Thompson. We'll see you Friday next week. See you guys.